when I was working in the small community, we would do things like we would give the clot busting drugs for heart attacks because, again, we didn't have access to be able to drive somebody to 2 hours to Thunder Bay to be able to go to the OR and get the stenting done at that time. So unfortunately, those who are living in rural communities are at a disadvantage, which is unfortunate. And seeing that now from where I'm working now to what I was working at, I think I would have been petrified even more so than I already was, had I known about the disadvantages that everybody up there was facing.
Asking you one more question because you said getting this stenting done. What is
Stenting, yeah.
stenting?
Yeah, so if you're having a heart attack, or they're suspecting that you're having a heart attack or that there's a blockage, they'll typically go in through your right wrist. They'll put in a little catheter and they'll feed it all the way up through your heart. They'll shoot through X-ray dye so that they can see how your heart's beating. You're awake at this time.
Hello, I'm John Brink and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people that say, okay, we know where Canada is around the world, and British Columbia on the west coast, right? Right. And where are you? Well, we are in Prince George, and we all know the big city in British Columbia called Vancouver. We are 500 miles north of Vancouver, or for our European friends, 800 kilometers. And that's where we are. It's nature's paradise. We have lots of trees, lots of nature, black bears, grizzly bears, caribou, deer, you name it, we have it. We live in harmony with nature. Today, a very interesting podcast. Her name is Jenn Johnson, and Jennifer is a nurse, emergency room nurse, has been for many, many years, has gone through all kinds of things in nursing, and is going to share those with us and all the challenges that go with it, but also has been exposed to toxic people or situations that made that job very, very challenging and not uncommon to her profession, but she's going to share her experiences with us and how she has managed it, how they became part of her life, and she is also in the process of writing a book that will come out in the fall. Jennifer, share with
Hi, how are you?
us your life. I'm doing well. Now, you're located in Canada, and in fact, in Hamilton, Canada, which is close to, relatively speaking, to Toronto on the East Coast. So we are in East Coast, Toronto, Hamilton, and Prince George. So tell us about yourself, your background. How did you get into nursing? Then some of the experience that you had and all the challenges along the way and that brought you to today.
Yeah, so I'm Jen. I've been an ER nurse for 16 years, primarily ER, big, small, all over the place. Have worked Northern Ontario as well as Southern Ontario. And I never wanted to be a nurse. It was never something that I grew up wanting to do. It was just something that I literally fell face first into doing. Um,
How did that
so I
happen?
ended I started my degree as a biology degree with Lakehead University, which is Thunder Bay, Ontario,
Right.
and the they've got a huge forestry program there. So a lot of the biology was based on plants, and I am no green thumb whatsoever. So a lot of the courses were plant based, and I'm going, well, this really isn't what I want to know. I'm not really interested in this. And it was in my second year that I failed the first half of an organic chemistry course, which then ended up putting me a year behind in my degree. So I'm going, well, obviously something's got to happen because really, what's going on? Like, I don't really care about this. I'm really not understanding it. And so thankfully, a girlfriend who I had known in first year was in nursing, and we'd go through her textbooks and see all the really gross, gory pictures of everything. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. This is really cool. So was able to transfer into a 3-year nursing program still at Lakehead. And when I finished, I had just met my now husband and started my career in a very, very rural area in Northern Ontario. So the town was less than 5,000 people. There was only one nurse for the ER and 3 nurses for the floor.
You became a registered nurse?
Yes.
Yeah, there is
Yep.
a difference, right? So you have
Yep.
different levels of nursing. And
Yeah. So
registered
the
nurse,
registered
go ahead.
is usually 4 years of university,
Okay,
and the registered practical nurses or licensed practical nurses, as the US calls them, is usually 2 years of college. So
okay,
that's the primary difference.
okay.
And so
Then,
yeah,
so
sorry.
yeah, go ahead. I just want to kind of get a feel for you and our guests watching us from around the world about our system that we have here in North America, but also specifically in Canada and the
Yeah.
challenges along the way. So that's why I'm kind of probing it. So there you
Yeah.
want from being trained to Northern Ontario to a smaller
Yep.
hospital that
Yep.
had it's not uncommon to the smaller communities. They have a small hospital. They may have one doc and then maybe
Mhm.
one registered nurse or maybe two, and that's about it. How many people would
Yep.
have lived there in the region?
Yeah, so about 5,000 where I was at that time. So there was one registered nurse for the emergency departments and one registered nurse along with 2 registered practical nurses on the floor. So it was about 14 beds.
Okay.
But really, you know, most people stayed for a couple of days and left. And then others were just waiting for long-term care. So most of what I saw early on was very non-critical nursing. It was only when I moved down south that was working at a stroke center, went from seeing maybe 2 to 3 to 4 people in a shift to 60 to 100 in a shift, depending on the day, and trying to pick it up from there. So going
You
from
called it
sitting on hands.
you called it a stroke center. What does that
Yes.
mean?
So, Stroke Center in Canada is a designated hospital within a geographical area where, if you have somebody with stroke like symptoms, they go to that specific site because that's where the neurologist is.
Okay.
That's where all the neurosurgery beds are. That's kind of where they're trying to condense care so that it's
So
all in one spot for one specific thing.
So what? Just for people to understand, so the 911 call goes in.
Hmm.
The mother or the wife is calling 911, the emergency, and say, "I think my husband has a crisis, and I need an ambulance right away."
Yeah.
So the
So
am okay,
ambulance would come.
yeah,
And then it's up to the paramedics. So there's also then now 2 levels of paramedics. So acute care, actually 3 levels. So primary care paramedic, which is 2 years of college, acute care paramedic, which is the 2 years of college plus one more year of education, and the critical care paramedic, which are usually based out of Toronto, um, at least in Ontario, which is another year. So 4 years total of education. So very are operating at levels of almost nurse practitioner, are giving lots of different drugs. So the paramedics come, they assess you, they say, okay, we think this is a stroke. So instead of potentially going to the closest hospital, they would actually, as long as the patient's stable, can then go, they'll divert to a stroke center,
right.
and we'll go straight to the stroke center to try and save time.
Okay, good. Okay,
Yeah.
go a little bit further. Now, just want to make sure that everybody
So,
understands, because this is very,
yeah,
very important information. Yeah.
yeah, it's a whole system that is based upon kind of getting the person to the right place as long as they're stable enough to go. So it's the same with trauma centers. It's the same with stroke centers or pediatric hospitals. Everybody tries to go to the best spot for the patient as long as they're stable enough to go to that
And
spot.
the first hour or whatever time
Yeah.
is critical, right?
Yes. Heart attacks, strokes.
Right.
You
Okay.
know, time is brain, time is cells, time is heart.
Right.
So if somebody's having a large heart attack, that you can see the changes on so they put on electrical leads. If there's changes that they can see that, correlate to a really big heart attack, they can go straight to a heart center, where they can go straight into the OR for an angioplasty to try and fix that big heart attack right then and there.
Now, Peter had a heart attack, but he's living in the small community that you started at, way
Yep.
north of Toronto, Hamilton, wherever it is.
Yep.
That's a disadvantage because it will take a long time for him to get through the local
Hmm.
nurse hospital to
Yep.
then be flown or driven to the main one. Time is
Yep.
critical.
Yeah. So when I was working in the small community, we would do things like we would give the clot busting drugs for heart attacks because, again, we didn't have access to be able to drive somebody to 2 hours to Thunder Bay to be able to go to the OR and get the stenting done at that time. So unfortunately, those who are living in rural communities are at a disadvantage, which is unfortunate. And seeing that now from where I'm working now to what I was working at, I think I would have been petrified even more so than I already was, had I known about the disadvantages that everybody up there was facing.
Asking you one more question because you said getting this stenting done. What is
Venting, yeah.
stenting?
Yeah. So if you're having a heart attack, or they're suspecting that you're having a heart attack or that there's a blockage, they'll typically go in through your right wrist. They'll put in a little catheter and they'll feed it all the way up through your heart. They'll shoot through x-ray dye so that they can see how your heart's beating. You're awake at this time, but they've given you medications for pain and sedation. So you're kind of in and out a little bit.
Right.
They'll look to see if there's any thinning, and if there's thinning in areas that's short enough to stent, they'll actually put in a little stent. Do you remember like the Chinese finger traps?
Yeah, yeah.
It's kind of the same wiring where it kind of pops out and it opens up that area so that the blood flow can get back to the heart where it needs to
Right.
go. And
Right.
so typically that's a day procedure. So an angiogram is where you're doing the procedure to look. An angio cath is when they're actually putting in the stent. So some people will have an angiogram to see if there's any blockages, but they don't have any, or they're too big to stent at that time. They actually have to have open heart surgery. They'll just do the angiogram, but when they actually start to put in stents, again, same time that they're there, that's an angiocath.
Which is
Super confusing. Which is when they actually put in the stents. Like
so
they'll
they
go in,
then
they'll do
put
the
it in, and that opens up the how do you call it, the artery or
the artery,
yeah,
the veins in the heart
yeah,
that opens up to feed the actual heart.
open that up. So very common,
Yeah,
right? Really, because
super common,
yeah, but
exceedingly.
but
Yeah.
but then if it then is more serious, it did just
Mhm.
not open it, but they put in the stent really to
Yep.
leave it there. They may
Yep.
do it on one artery, but they may have other ones. But if it
Yeah.
is more serious than that, then they have to contemplate open heart surgery, and that
Yeah.
for sure has to be at a major hospital because it
Yeah.
requires that whole infrastructure. That's major, delicate surgery.
Very. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the way things go now. And that's where I'm currently at. I'm at a smaller sister hospital of our trauma center. So I'm still at the bedside working in the ER, but I've written my book that's coming out any moment. And, looking at trying to bring journals to new nursing students to bridge the gap between education and the bedside. So doing all sorts of stuff to really try and support nurses, because we're all struggling, and the pandemic really just kind of pushed us all over the edge.
So, what is the title again of the book? I saw it someplace.
Yeah, nursing intuition: how to trust your gut, save your sanity, and survive your career.
And so, when is it coming out, Jen?
next week.
Next
It's for
weekend?
pre-sale
Wow.
right now. Yeah,
Have you got a copy of
for
it
pre-sale right
already?
now.
Your draft copy already that you can show to us?
Yes. Oh, it's downstairs. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law and her friend are visiting, so I've had to relegate my office to
That's okay. That's
my
okay.
kid's bedroom.
Yeah, maybe we'll if you can send it to us
Yeah,
and a copy of it, then we'll include it in our podcast once we release it.
yeah, not a problem.
Yeah, and usually what we do is podcasts are released very, very quickly, either the same day or the following morning. So we turn them over very, very quickly. Okay, that then being said, is
Yeah,
the other thing is that I noticed that you have had challenges with people in particular when you first got into Northern Ontario, the smaller hospital, but
mhm,
then when you got into other areas, the challenge has been for you in a lot of cases and likely for others in difficulties, hence the book. Tell us
yeah.
about that period that where you had the real challenges. What were the reasons for it? How did you deal with it? How should somebody watch out for it? Because it occurs not only in your profession, but in other ones as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, so bullying in nursing, unfortunately, is exceedingly pervasive. The old adage of nurses eat their young still gets said to new nurses today, even though it's ridiculous. It shouldn't be happening. So when I first started nursing, my charge nurse or my supervisor, for some reason or another, did not like me, and I don't know why, but she kind of made it her work's mission to make me feel, an inch tall, embarrass me in front of patients, trying to make me feel like I didn't know what I was doing. And it was awful. It was a very, very hard time, especially starting out nursing, let alone then throwing in bullying on top of it. But, it was 5 years of, stress and anxiety and pain. And looking back, it's one of those things where you can kind of go, well, the silver lining was she was so awful that we had to leave. I couldn't stay. So my husband and his mother and his family is all still up in that town. Um, but I couldn't stay there any longer. It was too much to bear. After 5 years, that was long enough. So ended up leaving. And so when I got to quit, I ended up going back to the hospital in the exact same outfit that I interviewed in. Went back to tell my boss, say, hey, as much as I would have loved to tell him off, okay, we're going to be professional about this. You go in, you say, thank you very much for the opportunity of the last 5 years. It's been very eye opening as to nursing and its roots and all of this. And no matter what, I'm continuing in emergency nursing. This is where I've got my emergency nursing start. So thank you for that. Um, and kind of kept my wits about me. Went onto the floor to kind of try and find my bully to be like, hey, I'm leaving. See ya. But she ended up kind of passing me by, and I said, "Oh, I just like to have a chat with you real quick." She goes, "Oh, I know you're quitting. Bye." I'm like, "Mm-hmm. Yeah, you couldn't even give me that one, eh? Okay." And so, kind of in a final act of really getting her digs in, she was in charge of the schedule, and so in my last 2 weeks' notice, she took away about half my shifts, and cutting my 2 weeks into 1 week pretty much, which I was fine with at that point. But it was just one of those things where um, keeping her in the back of my mind as to things that I will never let happen to anybody else, and making sure that I keep an eye out for any sort of behavior from anybody that resembles this in any way, shape, or form to really stop it in its tracks because
If
it's
you look back
completely
now,
acceptable.
and I presume
Hmm.
that's a while ago, if you look
Yeah,
back
that was,
now, what
yeah,
was the motivation on her part? It was not professional, I
no,
presume, but it was
no.
personal, or she had issues not only with you or mainly with you in that same.
Oh, she had a lot of issues with a lot of people. So one night shift, we hit a few of us sat down and tried to put together how many people or how many registered nurses she'd pushed out in about 25 years. And it came up to like 11 or 12, registered nurses in a town of, less than 5,000 people. You wonder why the town was deemed underserviced for nursing. Well, this is probably one of the reasons why.
Why did she do this? That's what is not clear to me because it's not unique to your profession. It happens in other places too. I've heard it from teachers that
Yep.
although they know the person is a problem to senior
Hmm.
management, they know it, but somehow have difficulty dealing with it. Has that to do with structure? Has that to do with union protection? Does that have to do with all the above? Because the whole organization suffers from it because if the morale goes down, you will not only lose the people, but all of a sudden the job becomes very, very difficult because you have to walk around on eggshells because you never know when you set her off or when something troubles her. I just don't understand how they keep going.
Great question. I don't know. And truly it wasn't just that hospital. I've had issues in other hospitals. I've brought it to managers' attention, and the commonality just seems to be like, "Oh, well that's that person." And you're like, "Pardon?" Like that's not it's not acceptable. That's not, had a nurse one time or twice scream at me in the middle of the department in front of all of my patients, and her screams were heard, throughout the rest of the department. It was a big department. And they did nothing. I went to my manager. I said, "Hey, like this is unacceptable. You need to deal with this." And they had brought us in for a little conference because I'm like, "I'm not putting up with this. This is ridiculous." And because I'd only been at that place of work maybe 6, 7 months, and she had been there longer, "Oh well, this is with you. This is your concern. Like, why aren't you, why is this such a big deal?" And I'm like, "Pardon?" Like you're like literally screaming at me in front of patients. I don't understand.
Now, Jen, if you go, now you have much more experience. If you
Mhm.
went back to the time and that setting, would you have done something different other than to quit earlier? But, but what else could you have done for people that are in situations like that? Because yours is not unique. Hence, the book is
No.
very important, your experience is very
Mhm.
important. What would you have done kind of looking back?
So, in my first instance, when the hospital was so small and I was walking past the CEO's office to go down from the floor down to the emergency department, like it was only one hallway, maybe I would have said something more like earlier. I had brought things to my manager's attention, but again, I just kind of got put off to be like, "Oh, well, that's just her." And you're going, "Okay, interesting." Short of keeping a journal for myself about behaviors, when they happened, what happened, who else was there, how the behavior started, what was the behavior, was there any resolution or was there not? Other than keeping a journal to very clearly identify this has happened, this has happened, this has happened. It's hard to go and talk to your superiors about like, well, I feel bullied, and they're like, well, what makes you say that? And you're like, if you can't come up with really good instances and multiple, um, you're kind of brushed off a little bit. So if you have a full journal of like, hey, here's 6 months worth of behaviors that are completely unacceptable. Here you go. Usually, bigger hospital systems will have safety occurrence reports or workplace reports where you can put in these instances because, again, paper trail is key. The more you can put in paper, in writing, in emails, things that can be found later on when potentially an investigation does happen, those need to be there because if the paper trail isn't there, the manager's hands are kind of tied if they actually want to do it, try and pursue some disciplinary behavior. If there's not any paper behind it, they kind of go, "Oh, well, it's he said, she said. Well, we can't really do much." The other thing that's kind of a problem is that it is the union protections, especially here in Canada. We've got a lot of nursing unions. and they're quite strong, but how do you have, the same union representing both the attacker and the victim? And so how do you kind of mitigate that when you're coming in at the same playing field? Because no matter what, the union's there to protect who they're representing. Well, when they're representing the attacker, how does that play out for the victim? So it's kind of hard that way, in the union sense of things, and especially if your union person is one person who also works the floor with you. There's bias. There's all sorts of, maybe they're really good friends with the attacker. Maybe that's, you're just gonna kind of get put under the bus on that
Delicate.
one.
Delicate. What I'm
Very.
hearing from you is say dialogue. Make
Yep.
sure you keep track of it. Do not interact with yelling, screaming. Stay professional at all times, and then keep a record of the interactions and the inappropriate things that happen. But stay professional, stay the course, and then no matter what, or if it is so serious that it affects your ability to function, your private, because you take it with you, it makes you go to work and you don't really like it because you already fearful again about what will happen. And so that
Absolutely.
makes it very, very difficult. I believe your book will be very helpful there. Now, the other thing, I just wanted to talk about the medical system as I know it. I'm a lay person, obviously. I'm 84 years old. I just turned 84 last Friday, November the 1st, 2 Fridays ago.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Happy
and,
birthday.
and I'm really into fitness and health. And I also wrote several books, actually. The last one that I did is Living Young, Dying Old. That's a picture of me,
Love it.
actually. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. And
Nice.
yeah, and so health, fitness, mental, physically, diet, all of those things are very, very important for me. And I wrote a book about it. And so, but in the process, I'm looking at our medical system, and there are lots and lots of challenges here in Canada. And I believe to a certain extent, although I don't speak for them, but with all the podcasting that I do, they are not unique to Canada, but both the United States and Canada fall in the same category as not being very successful at being preemptive in particular. And then our Canadian system is universality, which means everybody gets the same. And then professional medical is discouraged because it creates the impression of having an advantage, obviously, which is kind of strange and comical in a way, because the alternative is as far away as the airport. And
Truly.
really. And so, but what I've seen is, in particular recently, is that people are becoming more conscientious, partially because of podcasts like ours and many, many others, is saying that it's all about quality of life. For me, what is important, even at 84, I'm very conscientious about my diet. I'm in good shape. I go to the gym. I look at it this way. I need vitamin D or sunshine. I need sleep. I like to get 7.5, 8.5 hours sleep a night. I'm very conscientious about fitness. In my case, I take it all the way to bodybuilding and physique. You don't have to be an Olympian, but at least stay active, because your body has to be fit, and diet extremely important. My wife is vegetarian, and it took me a long time to listen to her as well as I could have, should have, until I got a bit of a wake-up call in 2008, when I was already, nearly 68 years old. I got a case of diverticulitis that ruptured, and as you already know, that you have a very limited time to do something about it about 48 hours. So by the time, and I have a high threshold for pain, that's not helpful either. But by the time I got to the hospital, they operated on me, took out 20 centimeters out of my colon, and the doc said to me, "You came this close." And so that was the wake-up call for me. And then I knew what I had to do is look at diet, listen to my wife more. I became a vegan. I'm, for all intents and purposes, vegetarian. I would say 90-10. And then I started to go to, I was just like everybody else, that you go to, at the end of the year, say, next year I'm going to do this, that, and I'm going to buy a membership to the gym. And then 2 weeks later, you can find 100 reasons why you're too busy to go to the gym. And so I was one of those. But then I knew what I had to do is I had to get a trainer and take it very serious. So after I recovered from my operation in 2009, I started to go to the gym with my trainer. After about 6 or 7 years, and I already was then well into my late 60s already, somebody came up to us and say, "Hey, John, have you ever thought about competing?" And I said, "Me? Yeah." And I thought, well, why not? So I started competing then.
There you go.
In 2017 in northern British Columbia. I became bodybuilding and physique. I came second in bodybuilding, third in physique, qualified me for the provincials, came in third in bodybuilding, second in physique, qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds. Then COVID came. And then now I'm training again. And for 2025, when I'm 85, going to the Arnolds. That's how I look now. And take my diet much more serious. The gym, I love going to the gym. And that's what I say to the people that are watching. Once you start looking at diet in particular, now I do all the shopping. If I go to a store, I go to the outside of the store because on the inside lanes is where all the processed or extra processed foods are. I have no idea what is in it, and so we don't eat that. So I'm primarily plant-based, and then all those things in organic, obviously, and so be very, very careful about diet and then exercise. And then I wrote a book about it, and the critical part from my perspective is it's not age. Age is a number. It's quality of life. And a lot of times for most people, the last decade of their life is when they take handsful of medicine that are toxic in a lot of ways, that they may fix one problem but create 2 or 3 other ones, and I'm not a doc. And so the less of that you need, the better. But the key is to stay mentally fit, physically fit, diet, and do all the basics. And that's what I do now. So I'm not here to say hoorah, hoorah, John, but I have about 10 different companies. Since the time I was 60, in particular, started writing books. The first one that I did is Against All Odds.
There you go.
And it's about, the going through all the ups and downs, and not about how successful John is, but all the challenges along the way. And so, as you well know, a lot of people said to me, "Oh my God, you're so successful, you write a book." Well, writing books is not easy, as you well know. And so,
It is not.
So it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. And since that time, I've written a number of other ones, including one that I have not talked to you about. But the second one is that it took me till I was 58 that I went into a store here and I picked up a book in Prince George, and the book's title was Driven to Distraction.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I picked it up. This is the actual book that I picked up. I picked it up, I wrote it in it, January 1997. The book was written by Dr. Hollowell, medical doctor. He's ADHD.
Yeah.
And I said, oh my God, that's me. And I wrote in the book in Dutch because there is stigma around it then. And I said, now I finally know who I am. And it was January 1997. And so that changed my life. And so the second book that I wrote is ADHD Unlocked, because what I found, the frequency of occurrence much higher than most people anticipated. There was a stigma around it. I call it a superpower. And
Right.
so, and I like that. And then I wrote another book, and you can relate to that because you refer to it, is that you had no plans on being a nurse. That just happened. You fell with your face right into it. And so what I say to a lot of people, and I saw a program on a United States television station, forget now which one, but I believe Canada is the same, that 75% of the people that work do not like their jobs. 70% of the 75 are looking for another job. And so I do a lot of presenting to younger people, and some a little bit, middle, probably, to high schools, colleges, universities. And a lot of times I ask, so when you're down here, what career, what direction do you want to go, respectfully? And a lot of them say, I don't know. I say it's important that you know, because once you make a direction, then you want to like what you're doing, because it will affect your whole life from here on forward. Not just your working life, as you so well know. If you're in a difficult situation, you take it home with you. And so what I say, if you want to be a truck driver, talk to a truck driver. Talk to them about what do they do, what do they like, what don't they like. Or if you want to be a contractor, building houses, talk to a contractor that builds houses. Or if you want to be a lawyer, talk to lawyers. A lot of people like to talk to you. If you say, I'm trying to find out what direction I should go, or an accountant, or, for that matter, an entrepreneur, or a business person. So I wrote a book about that. Finding your passion, living the dream. Very popular, actually. And then obviously the other one is about living young, dying old, and I'm in the process of writing 2 more books, actually, on other ones.
Nice. Well,
So
there you go.
So I wanted to mention all of that to you, so that I have had exposure to the issues that you are raising in terms of the workplace and how toxic it can be and how people affect you. The other one in particular that I wanted to talk to you about is that, because you're an expert in the field, our medical system is good in emergencies. It is not in any of the other areas. And a lot of docs that we have, nurses, registered nurses that we have, docs that we have, and other specialties in medicine that are not focusing on being preemptive and proactive. That's not being taught all that well. The other part, in my opinion, is that we have a shortage of docs because a lot of them are burned out because of the way our system is working. Same in the States to a certain extent. And then with nurses, we have a dramatic shortage of registered nurses, and other nurses likely as well. But I know it from registered nurses because I know several of them, although we have a major shortage here, and maybe in Ontario the same, and other places, that some of the emergency rooms are not operating because they cannot find the support staff to support the docs that do the work. Now, the interesting part that I'd like you to comment about is that I know several nurses that have retired or in frustration have left the profession, or other ones that have, I know several in middle ages, mid-40s, that want to get into nursing, that have had a lot of experience, but it makes it difficult for the schooling system, the colleges and university, to bring them into the category of registered nurses, although some of them that I know of have as much as 20, 25-year experience working in doctor office, but didn't go the next step. And it seems that the system makes it more difficult for them to get that there. Why is that?
I'm not sure. I know that it's hard coming at it from an adult learner status. A lot of people never had the prerequisites. So when they actually look to go into nursing school, either college or university streams, when they're looking to go back, they say, oh, well, I don't have the right chemistry, I don't have the right math. So not only are you looking to like get into the program, you also are then having to backtrack to then fill in gaps that are missing from 20 plus years ago. So a lot of, a 2-year diploma ends up turning into a 3-year or a 4-year because you're having to then remake up these courses, which it sucks, but it's kind of one of the loops that we have to jump through. Even bridging from registered practical nurse to registered nurse, the hoops that you have to jump through to try and get from RPN to RN. So I've got my work wife currently. She's been an RPN for same amount as I am, so 16 years. Most of those have been in the emergency room. So she's smart as a whip. I love her. And because she failed one course in college, but made it up and continued to graduate, obviously, they're preventing her from then bridging to an RN program because she failed a course 16 years ago. And I'm going, well, that makes no sense because look at her now. Like, look at the experience now that she's had years in the emergency department, where usually a registered practical nurse doesn't come into the ERs. Usually that's registered nurses only. They're only just starting to expand and let RPNs in to kind of help with flow. And a lot of what we see in the emergency department can very easily be managed by a registered practical nurse. But they don't see the connect between, she's been doing this for 8 years at least in the ER. Like, so to bridge her over to becoming an RN and an ER nurse or ER RN would be so easy, like so easy. So I don't understand why there's all this push and pull. There's all these hoops to jump through. It's the same thing. She's looking at bridging, but pretty much they want to put the RPNs and start them at square one in a 4-year full-time RN program, which is ridiculous.
So, and that's what is happening, what I heard from several sources here, because that is one of the problems that we have. A lot of times, a lot of from the medical doctors that I know, that, they have to do X amount of patients or seeing X amount in an hour, and the whole lineup in front of it, that a lot of people are going to the emergency department in the hospitals because they can't get service. The system is broken. That's what I'm saying, is that doctors are frustrated. Registered nurses, in a lot of cases, are as capable, if not more capable, because of the practical experience, as the doc is. Could do some of the naturopathic doctors are extremely helpful, but because of the system cannot do what they should. So there is something wrong with our system, and it's not only universality, but it's structured that to fail, not to succeed.
Truly. So it's the same here in Ontario. So you've got a family care doctor that you're supposed to be able to get in and see if you've got a minor complaint. The appointments are booked up. You can't get in to see them. You want to go to a walk-in clinic or an urgent care. Great options, especially for, this minor thing that you've got. But because you're not being seen by your family doctor, if you go to one of these clinics, the government gets a notification and then they ding your family doc. So then your family doc goes, well, if you do that one more time, we're going to have to let you go. And then all of a sudden you wouldn't have a family doctor. But the way to get around it is the family docs go, okay, well, we can't see you in today, but if you feel like you need to be seen, you should go to the emergency room. So unfortunately, a lot of things are coming in through the emergency room that should not. I mean, easily 50 to 60% of what I see in a day should not be there. They should be at the family doc's office. They should be a walk-in clinic. They should be an urgent care clinic.
And then you look at the walk-in clinics where I know there are doctors, and I've seen that for the last 20 or so years. If you go to the walk-in clinics, then there are 20 people ahead of you, and a lot of them really, when you talk to the doctor, and say, I'm so frustrated. I'm buried with all the people that are standing in the lineup, and then I have to do all the paperwork in the evenings, and then we're not getting paid for that, and then at the same time, the people that come here should not even come here. And some of them do it because, respectfully, it's socializing in a way. Maybe I should get them to look at this here. Say, forget. No, I'm not saying. I'm just giving examples of saying that, that I'm not saying that all of the walk-in clinics are bad, but what I'm saying is it doesn't cost anything to do that. And how do we change the system in such a way, not only walk-in clinics, but other things as well, saying how do we make it learn more effective and efficient? How do we bring more people into the system, and that it doesn't break down the system in a way like the emergency room. If you have something here, and I'm not being critical of it, I'm simply saying in some cases you have to sit there and wait 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, which is average, especially down this way. That's kind of what you're looking at. So,
here too.
Yeah, it sucks. But like you're going to wait, but you will be seen, right? You will be seen. We'll get blood work done if you need blood work. We'll do x-rays or CTs if you need them. Like you'll get seen and you'll get the care you need. But yes, it is a wait. So it's unfortunate, but there is that kind of, at least there's not that stress of having to worry about paying for it. Because I can't imagine, having a chronic disease and worrying about every time you're having like a little twinge of pain, and then am I going to the hospital? Am I not? How much is this going to set me back? Like, is my insurance going to cover it? I can't imagine that kind of stress. So
That's happening.
As far as,
that's in the States a lot, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, so that's what I'm talking about. Like that's the States. So I couldn't imagine worrying about that day to day, versus us where, yes, it's a wait, we grumble and it's a pain, but you're going to get seen, that you're going to walk away without having to pay a bill. It's, you kind of have to look at the bright side.
So if you think about what part of nursing do you love and which is a challenge, or what part do you hate, if anything?
Yeah. So I love watching somebody go from near death to thriving. There's nothing more satisfying than being able to intervene and actually save a life. Or you're solving a puzzle. Somebody comes in with some very vague complaints, but it's really affecting their life day to day. And then you can figure out, oh, by the way, it's your thyroid, or it's this, or it's that. That's fantastic. I love those days. The hard days are when the people are awful, when you're getting, threatened or hit. People are trying to hit at you or spit at you or calling you every name in the book and every language in the book. As a ER nurse, I'm 10 times more likely to be assaulted than corrections and police. So it's one of those parts of the job that, you didn't get trained for. So it's
and you never
something
get used to, really.
No, but you get real good at reading situations.
Yeah.
You get very, very good at reading tone. You get very good at reading body language, about kind of predicting how somebody's going to act. I don't wear anything like a lanyard around my neck. I just don't. Even if they're a breakaway lanyard, I do not. No, it's not happening. My last name is absolutely not on my badge. They keep trying to put it on my badge, and I keep whiting it out because there's no reason for my last name to be on my badge.
No.
It's already a safety concern for people to know my first name, let alone my last name.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where you have to get very good in order to survive as an ER nurse. You have to get very good at reading people and kind of reading between the lines and saying like, okay, I don't know about you. Think that if you were to get any more upset, things could go sideways very, very quickly. So I'm just gonna put my kid gloves on and handle you that way, because I think that's the only way that you're gonna be able to be handled.
My experiences have always been good with docs, with nurses, and I've been lucky, So, but you would you encourage people to go into that profession after all the things that you have seen and the challenges along the way? It can be extremely rewarding, as you already indicated, that you see somebody that is on the verge, only the help that you were able to be part of to get that person and to come back from that must be extremely rewarding. And then
Yeah.
the other challenges, they are just part of the challenges that you probably never get used to, but as you already indicated, you have been able to read it better, and
Yeah.
hence the book that you wrote covers a lot of all of those things, right?
Very much so. Trusting your gut when it comes to patients who may be sicker than they're presenting, trusting your gut when it comes to interacting with people, trusting your gut when you think something's off or wrong in a situation, human trafficking, domestic violence, those types of things. People aren't, I kind of operate on the basis that 90% of what somebody's telling me is the truth, but I'm always missing 10%. And whether they're lying to me purposefully or not doesn't really matter. It's just, I always try to operate on the assumption that I am missing something. I am missing more to this puzzle. So I can keep my eyes open. I'm not hyper focused just on one symptom or one complaint. I'm keeping an eye as to like, okay, well, how are they interacting with their spouse? How are they interacting with the person that's with them? How are they coming across? Do I think that they're altered? Do I have to worry about the story? Like the story and the physics of the story is not lining up with their injuries. So, oh, I fell down a flight of stairs. Really? And you only broke your arm? Like, how many stairs was it? Well, it was like 15 stairs. Okay. And did you land on carpet? No, concrete. That does not, like, you should be bumped and bruised like all over. It
Exactly.
shouldn't just be a broken arm. Like, it's the physics aren't matching. So it's just keeping an eye out for everybody, and to really try and make sure that I'm not going to miss something that really could end up biting me in the behind later.
So the next two questions is, what would you encourage people to go into the profession? And is the one, and probably the answer is that's why you wrote the book, and
Yeah.
then why did you write the book? So the two are connected. So maybe just share that with us.
Yeah. I would encourage people to go into nursing. I With the caveat that if you're finding in the first couple of years that you're not loving it, get out. It's not a career that you can do and kind of, only be there
Lukewarm.
half the time. You need to be in it. It's not necessarily giving your whole heart and soul, because you need something to keep for yourself also,
Yeah.
but it's very demanding physically, it's very demanding emotionally, it's very demanding spiritually, and you're coming into contact with people at the worst points in their lives. So it's a lot to handle sometimes, and you do get better with it. But when I am suggesting people try nursing, I mean, you can always come in for like a shadow day. 100% come in for a shadow day. See what it's actually like.
Yeah.
People think that they know what the ER is, but it's not like the show ER. It's not like Grey's Anatomy.
And
It's a lot of it is,
a shadow day is available, right? For people
yeah.
that,
So
as I said earlier, but I usually say, talk to people. You want to be attractive, you want to this, that, that. Talk to people so you understand it. A shadow day, I believe, would be very helpful to a lot of people, because it can be, your profession can be immensely rewarding for all the reasons that you gave. On the other hand, they can be emotionally very taxing on you. You also need a family around you that is supportive of your profession.
yeah, and a therapist or two, a secondary therapist if the first one's busy, because you need a therapist. Therapists have therapists. So don't worry about, opening up to somebody, because you can't carry all of that by yourself all the time. And as much as you love your work colleagues, sometimes they're not the right people to kind of vent to.
So, Jen,
Yes.
So at this one point, in the middle of the night, it was about 11 o'clock one evening, and I think it was in July, about 2, 3 years ago. And you know what happened? I sat up and I said, I have to write a book.
I did the same thing.
But
I did the
I'm
same
saying,
thing.
what happened to you? What made
So
you
I
decide to write this book?
So I got really burnt out with COVID, working at the bedside in the ER, not knowing if you'd live or die the next day. We actually had attorneys come forward in the very beginning to say, "Hey, we'll do everybody's wills for free," and we're like, "Pardon?" Like it's a lovely sentiment. I really do appreciate it because really we all do need to make sure that our wills are done and our wishes are known and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
You kind of got the sense that you weren't going to survive. So, I ended up working full time nights because my husband is also frontline healthcare. So he, was Monday to Friday, 8 to 4, doing infection control. So he also was needed during COVID, and we had 2 young kids. So I would work all night and then I'd stay up all day, and then I work all night and I'd stay up all day, and I work all night and I stay up all day. So I was a disaster by August. And all of a sudden it was like, well, if I die, how do I explain to my kids that mom chose to continue to go into work? So I had this overwhelming sensation that, yeah, I needed to write down stories. So let me write down the really good stories, and there were a couple of those from the last 14 years. And then the really rough stories started to come out, and it was looking at all of them together that I was like, well, what's the common theme here? And it was like, the common theme was trusting my gut. Did I trust my gut? Did I do anything with that feeling? Did I put it off? Was I believed? And that was the common theme through all of my stories. So, in spilling out my guts,
yeah.
I was able to bring it all together. And it's like, well, what's the science behind it? And so then go doing a deep dive into the science. And not only is there so much science on intuition itself, but there's also so much science on intuition and nursing specifically. So I'm like, okay, well, here's this concept, and nursing is very much evidence based, and if it's evidence based, we should be teaching it. That's what we're continually told. And so I'm like, well, this is something that, it's just another skill that we need and learn and need to kind of nurture and grow. So I'm going to put myself forward to kind of be that person who starts the conversation, because we all have talked about it, but usually it's just at 3 a.m. and kind of in hushed tones, and it's, next to a ghost story kind of thing. So the book was written in 6 weeks. I remember getting up really, really early to write it and staying up really, really late, but otherwise I don't really remember writing it. But same thing. Everyone's like, oh my God, that's so short. I'm like, yeah, but it was 14 years of ER nursing that led up to that point. It's
Exactly.
those stories that took, all that time to kind of process or and go through. So yeah, it started out as a trauma journal, and the ongoing joke at home is, if I ever need a new therapist, I just give them this, and you're like, so here's volume 1 of why I am the way that I am, so here you
Yeah.
go. And so yeah, it's my love letter to nursing, and my trauma journal, and my thoughts on intuition, and trying to open up the conversation, because it's a skill that we all use every single day, just to varying degrees, and whether or not we do anything with those little hints and nudges that we get from ourselves. So we need to look into it more.
So the observation that I have from our conversation is you love what you're doing in spite of it all, and you
Yep.
still would recommend it. But the other advantage that you have a partner in life that understands what you're doing, is supportive of you. Otherwise, it would even have been not only very difficult, but in a lot of cases, not possible, because that part again of it is extremely important as well. Now, the other part that I was going to say is that I've done a number of podcasts. You're number 346, where I'm
Ooh.
hosting, and I'm guesting probably another 150, 160. So I've done about 500 podcasts. I've done a number of podcasts on issues I'm not a medical doctor, I'm just a layperson, but on the medical system and mental and physical health and ADHD, obviously issues, that are important in life, and that I believe that podcasting and the virtual ability to communicate, like discussions that we have and others that I've had with other medical doctors and other layperson, but also specialists, are helpful to the public at large globally. And if I look at podcasting here, that I already know that our podcast will be watched by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people throughout the world. And I believe that's helpful and rewarding for myself, rewarding for my guest, but more than anything, that we can share these thoughts with other individuals around the world globally, because the issues are the same all over. And I believe that part is important. And so, Jennifer, thank you for being part of my guest on my podcast. I really enjoyed it, and wish you success, and thank you for sharing with myself and all my guests around the world your story. And we look forward to your book that is coming
Thank
out.
you so
What is the
much.
title again?
Nursing Intuition: How to Trust Your Gut, Sanity, and Survive Your Career.
And it should be out when? In the next month?
Next week.
Next
Next
week?
week.
So
Next
make
week.
sure that you send Scott a copy of the book so we
Yep.
incorporate it in our podcast. Our podcast will come out later today, Scott? Later today. So the sooner you
That's
send
on
it
it.
to us, because we let it go out very, very quickly. There is no editing
Perfect.
that we do. That's what I do with all my podcasts. We send them out very, very quickly.
Perfect.
Jennifer, it was a privilege and a pleasure. Good luck to you. Success with your book. I'm sure it's going to be
Thank you.
very, very popular. I hope this program will help it to bring it on the global market. Thank you
Same.
again for
And to
being my
you
guest.
and all of your writings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, Jennifer. Bye-bye.
Bye.